I'm Ariana Tejero. Welcome to TVGuestpert's broadcast podcast. This is a show where we talk to Hollywood creatives, innovatives, executives, and the hope is that you're able to take something away from it to apply to your own branding and marketing and promotion. On this episode is Judith Bishop, and she's an industry veteran. She just wrote a new book called Changing Channels. And part of this discussion is going to be booking segments, guests, everything you need to know behind the scenes from a producer standpoint. And Judith, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so very much. It's great to be with you.
I'd like to start with just a brief snippet of your career and your background.
Yes, I started in the business in 1975 with no experience and a lot of luck. I landed a job as a co-anchor on a UHF cable station. Now, many of your viewers and listeners may not even know what UHF is. It's so old world. But in any event, I went from there to being a producer at WABC in New York. Eyewitness News. At the time, it was the #1 rated station and the #1 rated newscast in the country. And from there, I did a variety of things. I did magazine pieces for the old Fox network before it became Fox News Channel, did some PBS documentaries. And one of my all-time favorite jobs was at CNBC, where I was in charge of Hardball with Chris Matthews and Tim Russert's interview program and the Venerable Dick Cavett show. Working with those three giants was really a joy. And then I moved on later to Court TV, where I was executive producer of the tape court coverage and did some primetime pilots and ended up in Miami on the air at NPR covering arts and entertainment. Even though politics had been my strong suit through most of my career, every now and then I'd veer off into arts and entertainment.
When you first started way back in the day, you said in the 70s, did you do any on-camera work back then as well?
Yes, I was a co-anchor. It was a long, all day long financial show. We signed on when the market opened and we signed off when the market closed. And it was seat of your pants. I was not only the co-anchor, I was the producer, I was the writer, I was the makeup artist, I was the hair artist. I was the rip and read from a person. We even had to change the carbon ribbons on the old AP and UPI machines. I'm really dating myself.
Well, you've done everything then from Wall Street to politics to arts and culture. And how would you compare? I mean, a lot of people, they'll start on camera and then transition to producing or go back and forth. How do you compare the two? How do they inform each other?
Well, I think it's good if you've done both because then you have an appreciation. When I was on air, honestly, I think I would have been much happier if I'd had a support staff, but it was a bare bones operation and we did not. Basically your goals are the same. You want to present the news and you want to present it as straightforward and unbiased and as professional looking as you possibly can. Obviously when you're not on air, you don't have to spend as much time with mascara and eyeliner. Which can be a real plus, especially when it's raining or lightning out and you're getting ready for a shot.
Very true. In your time at CNBC, you said that was a part of your career that you really enjoyed. With Hardball, were you involved in the actual creation of the show?
Yeah, what happened was Hardball was done out of the CNBC Washington Bureau, and the headquarters was up in New Jersey in Fort Lee. The man in charge, the vice president of programming, said that he was sure that they had a crack team in Washington, but he didn't know any of them. And this was a big thing, trying to make a show that really showcased Chris Matthews properly and would catapult his career in our network. He said he'd feel more comfortable if he sent an executive in charge down that he had confidence in, and he selected me. And it was a great honor, and I was happy to report back to him that the Washington Bureau was more than up to the challenge. They did a lot of the work, the lion's share of the work. We got the show on the air in 4 weeks. Pretty good, right?
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. Just my own personally, it's very interesting to me just hearing the launch part of it, because I was involved in that a couple of years ago with where I am now. And there's something to be said about being from the ground up of a project and you become so close to the people involved, and it's like no other experience.
It is. Amazing. You're absolutely right. Development and launching are they're exhilarating.
And to tie it back to TVGuestpert, the whole point of the organization is that we get clients and we want to prep them for segments and show them what goes on behind the scenes, because a lot of times like, you'll book a segment and the guest has these high expectations, and usually that's not the case, because you talk in your book about rundowns and breaking news and how you have to be pretty much ready for anything. So from your experience in your career, I want to talk a little bit about booking segments and what that entails.
That's essential, honestly, because if you're not presenting the right guest at the right time with the right message, then you're failing, basically. Booking is an art. In a larger operation, you have people who are professional bookers. That's what they do. And they have, in the old days, it was a Rolodex. And now I guess it's a contact list in their iPhone of people from all walks of life, all political persuasions, doctors, lawyers, entertainers, psychologists, experts in all fields. And they go to them. And, from the producing standpoint and the booking standpoint, is you want somebody reliable. You want somebody that is going to show up on time, be well versed in the subject, be well prepared, and deliver the goods, because your show is only as good as their segment.
What's your standout booking, like your favorite booking? Not to put you on the spot. Is there one that comes to mind?
Well, I had one day that was it was historic. It was in 1980, I believe. It was the day that Anwar Sadat was assassinated. And I had to put together something in New York. And we were able to get the Israeli consul general to go on camera. And his name happened to be Bibi Netanyahu. And then after that, I went on to interview Elie Wiesel. And then that evening, a New York senator, long deceased, a Republican liberal named Jacob Javits. So that was a pretty stellar day, because it was a global incident that happened. And we had 3 really expert, charismatic, well-known guests. I guess that day was pretty high. And then my favorite assignments ever were the Democratic conventions in 76, 80, and 92. Being at a convention it's like nirvana for a political junkie.
And what about your worst booking ever?
Oh gosh, Ariana, that's a funny story. It was at Eyewitness News, Channel 7 in New York. We did a Sunday morning talk show. We were doing something about landlord-tenant issues. So I booked a woman who represented tenants, and I booked a gentleman who represented landlords. They were familiar names in the business, but I had never met either one. So they came in, and I'm not kidding. He was about 6'6", and she was about 4'11".
Wow.
When they sat next to each other, it looked like this, and it was impossible to get a 2-shot of the two of them. And it looked ludicrous, to be honest with you, but they were good guests. They were the experts, and the content of the dialogue was okay, but the visuals not so great.
Yeah, that can be tricky. And I think people don't realize behind the scenes how tough it can be, even with talent. If you have an anchor that's 6 feet tall and then another one like a woman who's 5'4", it can be tricky just cheating them. And then you're limited with lighting too. So there's a lot that goes on behind the camera that people aren't aware of.
Absolutely. And we didn't have any pillows to boost her.
Oh, wow. I mean, to bring in the pandemic too, just because the pandemic has really changed the way that the industry operates, in the sense that like we're doing now, a lot of remote interviews, Zoom, and you don't always have like TVU, live view capability. So quality is a really important thing. Content is a really important thing. So in your eyes, what have you observed just being a viewer in these times as to what works and what doesn't for interviews?
Well, my personal experience is during the day, if I do a Zoom interview, I can get the lighting acceptable, but at night it's really hard. So I purchased a ring light on Amazon. It comes in a very professional looking black canvas case. And that would help, I think, if you're going to do a lot of TV. Get a ring light. They go from about $80 to maybe $140. And that's a plus. Also, obviously, keep your background simple. If you have white, that's a good thing. If you have a bland color, that's a good thing. I think if you have bright red or dark green in your living room, that could be a problem. Also, go for depth in the shot. You don't want to look like you're plastered up against a wall. It looks like a mug shot. And then obviously your attire, wear something simple. You know, if you like lace and ruffles as a woman, that's fine, but save it for your private life. Go a little more tailored. And I personally, this is personal, I'm not crazy about prints on television. I'm really not. So I think solids are better. And makeup, put on more than you would wear in your normal life, but don't go crazy. And hairstyling, I guess that's important too. It's so easy to have a stray cowlick here or there, which can be very distracting. And then I guess have a message, know what your subject is. Someone in the coaching business once told me the rule of three, that you go into an interview wanting to make 3 points. And then if you get stumped for an answer, you try to maneuver the question back to one of your 3 points. But you can't BS an interviewer. If they ask you a question that you don't like, it's their show and you've got to try to answer it in the best way that you possibly can.
A lot of the points you just touched on, especially the rule of three, you can find in the TVGuestpert book, which I personally enjoyed just because Jackie lays it out so in such an organized way, where it talks about, how to look on camera, how to keep it succinct with the segment, and also just realizing that 5 minutes for a segment just flies by. And usually you can't get to all of the points you're thinking of. So having 3 really solid talking points, and then the appearance, the background, all of that. She has a lot of good details in her book about that. And with that, I want to transition to your book because I definitely want to talk about it, Changing Channels. So the inspiration behind your book, tell us about that.
Well, I watch a lot of cable TV, and during this current administration, it's gotten a little out of control. So I decided, look, I have 40 years experience. I've been in the trenches. I'm an observer of the cable networks now, and I really, instead of talking back to the screen, I decided to pound it into my computer and to write a book. I also cherish journalism. It's not just a paycheck or a job. It's something important that we're trying to do, and we're trying to do it properly. And even though I think the motivation of a lot of the newscasters right now is right, they're caught up in this vortex. And I think that some of the coverage has really gone too far over the line from just the facts to what I call outrageous opinions.
And you talk about too in your book, just the facts, how sometimes networks can kind of use that as a guise, which can be a dangerous territory. Like, how do we differentiate? Just the facts versus a slogan, just the facts, which I think, it's so important right now because viewers, especially during pandemic election season, they're oversaturated, they're inundated with content, and it's difficult if you only watch one side of things. It can be kind of brainwashing, right?
It can. Back in the days when it was just ABC, CBS, and NBC, and a 30-minute show, at the end of those shows, they had a commentary from another prestigious reporter. And right across the screen, it said commentary. Went on for about 2 minutes, and it was very clear that it was different from just the facts. But today, I think it's gotten confused. And, you and I are in the business. We can tell the difference. We have a barometer that will let us know what's fact and what's fiction. But if you're an average viewer and you hit the remote and you see a person in a business suit sitting on a news set with news type music and the words breaking news, breaking news, breaking news running across for an hour. And then you see graphics over their shoulder that feature the main players of the day and the main events of the day. And that's what they're discussing with famous politicians and office holders. You think you're watching a newscast, and you're not. You're watching what I call talk television. And I just think that we have to differentiate. If you want to do talk television, fine, but don't dress like an anchor. Don't sit like an anchor. Maybe they should have a set that looks more like the Tonight Show. I don't know, or a Charlie Rose show where that it's a conversation. It's an interview. It's not X number of people did Y number of things. It's more commentary. It's more opinion. And there's a place for that, but just don't dress it up like a newscast.
I think this applies to also to guests and experts, because as a guest, you don't want to be pigeonholed into, left or right or what have you, and you want to be able to diversify your bookings, right? So what advice do you have to guests who want to be featured on every network just to keep it impartial?
Well, you can't change your story. Hypothetically, if you're in favor of gun control, you can't say you are on one network and that you're not on another. So you have to be consistent in your message. Now, you can carve out a middle of the road message. And there's always on the one hand this and on the other hand that, so that you seem as if you're open to both positions on an issue. We used to have a really easy time booking. To get back to one of your other questions, we would book one from column A, maybe a liberal, and one from column B, a conservative, and then the anchor would ask equally tough questions of both guests. And now the questions can be softball to the side that they're sympathetic to, and they can be very, very aggressive to the opposite side. And then what's, I think, even worse is that sometimes the anchor asks the question and then they answer it too. And that's not their job, as we well know.
Yeah, very long-winded questions. That can be the case. I mean, like what you said, I think to break it down for guests or future experts watching this, consistency is super important. So if you're booked for a segment, definitely stick to your point. Second, keep it organized. And then third, I think it's good to maybe qualify with, like you said, statements from both sides. Like, yes, okay, I feel such and such about this issue, but this side says this, and then this side says this, and it gives you more credibility or credence as an expert. I think that's good advice.
And also another thing, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and talk to the booker or talk to the segment producer and find out what they're looking for so that you can tailor your information to the thrust of what they're trying to get across in their segment. And then the other thing is, don't be too sensitive, because you mentioned rundowns. I, as a producer, may have someone slotted in for 7 minutes on the rundown, and then there's an explosion, and all of a sudden there's 7 minutes gets down to 2:20. And don't feel offended. There's usually a good reason why you were cut. And it's probably not your performance. It's some external situation that you can't control that the producer's reacting to in real time.
When you were at the network, obviously there's booking producers, but did you also pick up the phone and talk with some of the guests ahead of time to go over the segments?
Yeah, I did. And in journalism, as you all know, we don't give you the questions in advance. But you do give them the topics. If you're talking to someone about climate change, you might say, I'd like to concentrate in particular on the impact on major coastal cities. Now, that's not telling them the exact question, but it's letting them know that you want to know how it's going to affect islands like New York and Miami Beach, for example. So that's perfectly fine. And also, I think that as a booker, you have to listen to what the people are saying, because sometimes they'll lead us in a direction that we didn't know was so fruitful, or that they had so much knowledge about.
Did you ever have the opposite happen from the control room, where the guest was going great, conversation was good, and then all of a sudden it went rogue and you had to dip out or find a way to get out of that quick?
Every now and then you get a guest and you'll ask a question and they'll go, yes, I find that to be true. Silence, and more silence. And that's nerve-wracking. But one thing about booking, I have to tell you, I think whoever you're booking for has a big impact. The easiest booking I ever got in my life, and the best guests I ever got in my life, was working with Dick Cavett. You did not have to cajole people. You would call and say, Dick Cavett would like to interview. And the answer, no matter how big the star was, tell me where to show up, what time. It was so easy, and yet we had the best guests. But that was by virtue of his reputation and his talents.
To go back to this thing about prefab questions, I think some advice for experts and guests that a lot of people don't realize: it is unethical to provide any sort of questions ahead of time. And a lot of times you get that request and it can be tricky to navigate, like, oh yeah, no, we don't do that. And people don't realize why. But if you think about it, yeah, it's supposed to be an extemporaneous interview, and that's fine to give the topics. Obviously you want to have some sort of direction, but to script it out is just not the way that news works, because it's news and it's not pre-scripted.
As an expert guest, I don't see anything wrong in your pre-interview of mentioning something that the producer or the booker may not have raised, but just tell them once. And if they pick up the ball and run with it, that's great. But if they want to just let it go because it's off topic, then just acquiesce to their agenda. It's their program.
Going over these things ahead of time too, just general sense, helps a lot with B-roll and with elements, with graphics, all that kind of thing. And so you kind of stay sequential, which helps the control room a lot. So that's good too. So as potential guest expert, any sort of elements that you have that could bring to the interview is always super helpful to the producer, I'd say.
Absolutely. And you know something, you become a regular. For example, if you're an education expert, they may have you on to talk about the impact of COVID on early childhood education. And then later there may be some study about various ways to teach languages to elementary school children. And, you know, if you're a good guest and you play by the rules and you deliver the goods, they're going to call you back for the second and the third and the fourth time that are sort of permutations of your original topic, but still in your bailiwick of expertise.
Yeah, you become kind of the go-to person. I can definitely say where I am that whenever topics come up, like you said, education, or let's say epidemiology, it could be whatever topic, there's that one person that stands out in your mind, like, oh, he or she was good on camera, was really good with the answers, super organized, on time, like just checked all the boxes, and we always book again. And I think it helps viewers too, just to have that regularity, like you begin to trust this person on the broadcast.
That's an excellent point. That's true, because trust is so important.
Yes. When you were at the network, did you ever get pressure from the powers that be, like get a call to the control room, like, hey, you need to go this way or that way? Did you get that kind of pressure from management?
Do you know I didn't? And in my book, Changing Channels, I write about the evolution, which I call the revolution of Fox News Channel. I did not work there, but at CNBC at one point, Roger Ailes was in charge. And look, I'm not a fan of Fox and what they're doing. I think it's partisanship, not journalism. But MSNBC and CNN also have that same problem these days. But I must say that Mr. Ailes never, ever, ever asked me to book a guest or unbook a guest or do a story or spike a story. Now, maybe he did with other producers, but I never, ever got input at all. So I hear these days with partisanship on all three major networks, there might be some pressure from above, but no, I really don't recall any. I was called on the carpet a couple of times about the budget, but I'm not about the guests.
That's really refreshing to hear. Where I am too, we are not ratings driven. It's a very different setup for the network. So I've never gotten that kind of pressure either, which I think it's rare too. Like, especially if you work at the networks nowadays, it's always, you know, the ratings are behind what's driving the network. So it's really nice to have the journalistic integrity and also the creative power, not to have that pressure like, oh, you need to sway this way. It's always like, if we present one thing, we're going to qualify it with the other side too. And it's very balanced. So super proud of that. And I'm glad to hear that you had that experience too.
I did. You know, looking back now, something just occurred to me. It wasn't real pressure, but sometimes at local news, they develop a weather obsession.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, it's 2 inches of snow is not exactly a national tragedy, and we don't have to cover it for 3 days. So there was a little pressure sometimes on hurricanes, floods, and snow and ice storms. But, you know, that was sort of a benign pressure. It wasn't advancing any agenda.
And I think with that too, definitely at the affiliates, you get that kind of pressure from management, just depending on where you live in the United States too. Like if you are in South Florida, Tampa, there's that rain, you know, hurricane that people want to see. And with that, it's like, how do you keep it creative, keep it fresh, and really differentiate yourself from the other networks? And I think there's an opportunity for guests or experts too to weigh in and just try something different, because you always want to keep it fresh with the content.
Good point.
For us out here in California, wildfires, that's a big deal. And it's like the same thing every year. So how do you continue to cover it without getting sick of it? Right.
Yeah, but when you do local news and probably national news, there's cycles. Oh, it's time again for the Memorial Day parade, or it's time again for the hurricane preps. And yeah, there is a cycle. Absolutely.
For guest experts watching this, what would be your takeaway? Just say I am an expert who wrote a book and I want to book a segment. Like, what's your advice to me?
Keep it short, keep it powerful. Let them know who you are. Let them know what your book is. Let them know a brief synopsis of the book. and don't overpromise. Tell them the truth, basically. The one thing that I must say as a first-time author that I find very, very distressing is you'll put something out there and it just evaporates into cyberspace. You get no response from the person. Believe me, we can handle rejection. It wouldn't bother me if I got a two-sentence email. Thanks for reaching out to us. Sorry, it's not going to work with our current plans. No problem. I know you don't want me. Move on. But when you don't hear from them, you go, oh, maybe I had the wrong email address, or maybe they left or went to the competition. And it's distressing. It's almost bad manners, but we used to respond to people. And if
I
people,
agree with that too. I mean, personally, that's how I am and my coworkers too. Just being thorough is so important because it's a reflection not just on you and your team, but the whole network. And yeah, if you don't want to book someone or you get an email from a publicist, not
Mhm.
just expert advice, this is for producers too. Just have the courtesy to at least respond so the person isn't left hanging. That's always nice.
It is, and you don't have to make a lot of excuses. Make it brief.
Oh,
2 lines are fine.
yeah,
Good
be
luck with the book. Sorry, we're not going to be able to book you this month.
honest.
It's enough.
If only it were that simple.
I know. Good intentions, right?
Yeah. Your book too, just a few more takeaways on that. Super excited to have it coming out. Again, like I learned a lot from it. It's a quick read too, very easy, and so much research went into it.
It did. It did. Because I thought, okay, using the word opinions from the title, changing channels from just the facts to outrageous opinions. I have opinions, but I think that the readers want to hear from a broad spectrum, from a multiplicity of voices. So it was very, very important to me to get people who are in the trenches now. They're working 24/7. They're on your local cable stations and national cable stations, rather, and hear what they have to say. And I was fortunate to secure some interviews. And to be honest with you, I couldn't get some people to talk to me, but they had said things in the public domain, in speeches, on television, in books, in lectures. And I quoted from them because I thought those are the voices that the reader really wants to hear from. They want to know what those people are thinking when the cameras are not rolling. So as a result, as you say, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of bold-faced names, and there's a lot of quotes that go back, from the days of Edward R. Murrow on up to today.
Yeah, I really like the historical perspective too. And I think, the future of news too, because the industry keeps evolving and there's the social media part of it too. There's the pandemic that's again changed the way we do things. So it's like, what does the future look like? Which I think you touch on too in the book pretty well.
But you mentioned social media. I have one section in the book. It was a lame joke, but it kind of says it all. We have so many citizen journalists now. People who are they and what are their credentials? Who looked at their resume? Who hired them? Who's editing them? And they go on Twitter and Facebook and pontificate, and they call themselves citizen journalists. Well, my take is I don't want a citizen dentist or a citizen accountant doing my taxes. Why would I want a citizen journalist? It's a profession. Get a real one.
Yeah, I think social media definitely it's a tool, but it can be a detriment too. And just advice for guests too who are trying to book in that area of being social media coaches or influencers, just to be careful credibility wise. And I think it is possible to build yourself up and build a resume being a citizen journalist. It just takes time, and to just really develop that relationship with viewers is so important.
Yes, it is. The world is changing, as you said. The technology, I don't know, everything that's new today may be old hat 6, 7, 8, 9 years from now. Who knows? So this
Speaking of
is
social media, how can our viewers of the podcast find you on social media?
JudithMBishop.com and changingchannelsbook.com. And it's on Amazon. And I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn.
So much just for your honesty and just your wit and everything. It's very humbling for me to just working in the industry to hear your stories and your advice from such a veteran.
Well, you're
So
doing
thank
a
you for
great
that.
job and you've got a great future, and enjoy it. It's a wonderful career and you're doing it brilliantly.
And thank you to Jackie Jordan, the Front and Center podcast. And you can find TV Guestpert at TV Guestpert on pretty much all social media handles, Instagram, Facebook, also on YouTube. And you can download the podcast wherever you watch your podcasts. And thank you again, Judith, for your time for this episode, and hope to talk to you again soon.